husband and I got pregnant in 2011. Halfway through our pregnancy, baby was measuring big, and so we got another ultrasound, and they discovered that baby had a lot of extra fluid around. We went up another level ultrasound, found that there was definitely something wrong with baby. And further down the line, they discovered that she had a congenital heart defect. Her left side of her heart was severely underdeveloped, and so she would be born with a heart defect called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. So August 2nd, 2012, Gracia Lorraine Hunt was born, and she was a beautiful baby with dark hair, and she was just 6 pounds. She was this tiny little thing, and when she was born, she was whisked away because of course they knew that she had the heart defect, so they had to monitor her and see if she was okay. She was checked out and hooked up to wires and all the things right away, but she was still doing okay. She wasn't able to eat because we were told that she would have open heart surgery that first week of life. When she was 6 days old, she had open heart surgery, and they went in and they reconstructed things and put things in other places so that everything would pump through the right side of her heart so that she could keep living, that she could keep thriving. After open heart surgery, she had an intubator through her nose, a tube down her throat to just kind of give her calories. It wasn't food at that point, it was just calories. Her chest was still open, you could see her heart, and she was on this big, huge machine that was basically pumping the blood in and out of her body for her so that she could rest, so that she could recover. 7 days after that, she was taken off this great big machine, and she was closed up, but she still had the intubator in, and we still couldn't hold her. It wasn't until a month into being at the hospital that she was still intubated. She had a really hard time getting off of that. She would get nervous without it, and so of course we made the decision to get a tracheotomy. She also had a GJ tube placed at the same surgery so that she could get food in her system. After that surgery, she started growing, and she started being so happy. She was the happiest little girl, and we got to hold her again. And I remember just walking into her room every single morning, sitting on this rocking chair next to her bed and holding her every second of the day. I rarely left to even have a meal. And I just loved being in that place. We sang and we read stories, and I talked to her, and she was still hooked up to all these wires, and she was still heavily medicated, slowly weaning off. But oh my goodness, I love that spot. That spot was where I wanted to be from day one. Time went on, the weeks and days went on, and she kept on thriving. She kept on growing. She kept on lighting up the room every single day. On her 81st day, she had the best day. It was literally her best day. She was happy. She was alert. She was looking around the room. She was smiling and cooing, and we just played and sang and read stories all day long. And that night I had such a hard time leaving her. For some reason I could not leave her side, and going home with my husband, since he had to work the next day, we had to go. I just felt this tug that I didn't want to leave. She was just pulling me and saying, "Mom, don't go tonight." And I wish I would have listened. The next morning, it was very early, like 3 o'clock in the morning, I got this phone call. and it was Gracie's nurse. She was telling me that Gracie was having a hard night. It wasn't the first time that she was having a really bad night. So I just, like every other time, I put a sweatshirt over my head and I grabbed an overnight bag and I drove down to the hospital. And this time was different. I walked up to her floor and I walked through those double doors, and there was a lady that stopped me and asked, "Are you Gracie's mom?" And I said yes. And she said they have been doing compressions on Gracie for an hour. And at that moment, I knew exactly what it meant. So I walked down the hall with all of these machines and doctors and people just taking over the entire hallway, and her room was packed with doctors and that same big machine that she was on after her surgery. And a doctor came out and said the same thing. We've been doing compressions for just over an hour and things just aren't looking good. We're trying to find an artery, we're trying to find something to put her on support. And so I stood outside that room and looked through the window and saw one of her nurses with 2 fingers on her chest, just pumping it over. And at that moment I stopped and I prayed. I pleaded with God and I asked him, please, don't let this be it. I'm not ready. I want more time. After another half hour or so, I called my husband, I called my mom, telling them to come down and be with me. And a doctor came out again and said, it's been an hour and a half, and we've done everything that we can. She doesn't have a heartbeat. I remember looking at the clock, and it was 4:55 in the morning, and that was when she was gone. They cleaned her up, and they wrapped her in blankets, and they told me it was okay to come into the room, and I sat in the rocking chair, and for the first time, I held her without any wires attached to her. And I cried so hard. And then family came, and I was numb, and I rocked her all day. And for the first time, I actually could pick her up out of that chair and walk around the room with her. I always had this dream of dancing with her. I loved to dance. And so I danced with her around the room. And they had to pluck my arms away from her because it was time. It was time they had to take her from me. In the days following that, you just feel numb. You feel like you're just going through the motions, like you're a feather just floating around. It's a weird feeling. And planning your baby's funeral is a nightmare. Picking out the songs that you'll sing, hoping that people will come, it's really hard. My hope is in Jesus. My hope is in his promise that I will see her again. I just have this picture of her running toward me and giving me the biggest hug and saying, I love you, Mama. I'm proud of you, and I'm so happy that you're here. I find hope in that day, but my work isn't finished here yet. And until that day comes, I will keep a legacy for her and a way to keep her story and her name alive.